Shall we?
Yeah.
Our topic for today is God or the ego. We're looking at chapter 11. I've been in Europe for the past couple of weeks, so instead of a 32-page booklet to give you, this one's only about 16 or 17 pages, but maybe that's just as well. We never get through the whole thing anyhow. I've picked out what I think are some of the more interesting passages to look at in this particular chapter. We're beginning to move a little bit further and deeper into the metaphysics of A Course in Miracles at this point. Let's just say something about this topic, God or the ego. As you know, the Course in Miracles is a non-dualistic system, as a monistic system, which really says, well, actually, let's read on the second page, at top. Let's read that paragraph from the introduction of the Course. Either God or the ego is insane. If you will examine the evidence on both sides, you will realize this must be true. Neither God nor the ego propose a partial thought system. Each is internally consistent, but they are diametrically opposed in all respects, so that partial allegiance is impossible. So this is the predicament that we all find ourselves in. The predicament is that we try to give a little bit of attention to God, and we wind up giving also a great deal of attention to this thing that we call an ego, which by this time we know actually doesn't even exist. That's why this whole thing is literally a mythology. That's why all of this life is literally a mythology. That's what Yasko was actually saying when she was holding up God's will for me as perfect happiness. It's perfect happiness because that's the only thing that's possible. And also in terms of the Course in Miracles, this is just a review for some of you. We're already home. The atonement has already been completed. It's done, it's over, it's finished. And this whole experience that we seem to be having is a dream. It's literally a dream. So the process that we're going through is really a process of awakening. And we are in the process of struggling to awaken. And the struggling to awaken really just means one of progressively learning how to pay attention, first of all, to our own insanity, and becoming aware of how incredibly insane we are, to have bought into a delusional, insane system in the first place. Now, what the delusional insane system says is that I am a body, that I live in a world where there are all kinds of problems, particularly with my body, but also with all my relationships that I have with all these other people who are obviously idiots. And a part of my problem is that I see them as idiots. I don't see them as my brothers and my sisters, which actually the Course has to be taken incredibly literally. When I say incredibly literally, by that I mean there really is literally no...
Tom, that's your phone.
Oh, good Lord. I never get a call, ever.
I'll turn it off for you.
Yeah. If it's God, tell him I'm busy. I lost my train of thought when that happened, but we'll get it back. So it's quite an adjustment for us to make. I'm sure we've all asked ourselves the questions, why the hell am I here in the first place, or how to get into this body, or into this particular place of space and this time, and why can't I realize the truth? The Course, as you also know, is radically different from traditional Christianity, although it's basically a Christian document, because we're still talking about Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and and getting back to the Christ mind, which is the one mind that we are all participating in. Part of the problem is that we can't do it just partially. We've got to make this total commitment, this absolute and total dedication to being back home again. And we're constantly being distracted. The Course, and we'll see this a lot as we go through this particular chapter, the Course asks us to be aware of how much temptation plays a role in our lives and how easily we are succumb to anger, to doubt, to fear. There's a section here, it's called the dark companions. And that's what the dark companions are. The dark companions are all these ideas that I have in my mind about who I think I am, which has nothing to do with who I really am. So it is my fears. That's a dark companions. And my anxieties, those are dark companions. And the Course is asking us not to entertain these dark companions, asking us to actually be aware of how much we do this. We're not even aware of how much time that we spend in this sort of miserable state. On the whole, this is not a happy world. On the whole, it's not. On the whole, it's a pretty unhappy place for us to be in. And it's been, times have been much worse than these, but anybody can be just as insane as ever, right? Let's look at the top of 3. I want to read you this. This is from the introduction as well. So the closer you come to the foundation of the ego's thought system, the darker and more obscure becomes the way. Now you would think that as we're getting closer to the center of the thought system, that things would be coming brighter, but actually the opposite of that is happening, because at this point the ego begins to realize that you're playing around with fire, but I mean that you're playing around with something that could destroy it, right? And so it's going to resist that. There'll be tremendous resistance. There'll be a lot of pull to fall back into the old ways, whatever the old ways are, right? Going on with this. Yet even the little spark in your mind is enough to light it. Let's keep in mind again, there is this little spark, thank God, which is always there. Again, the Course says there's no one in whom this light has gone out completely, so it doesn't make any difference how far away it may appear that some other mind is, or how regressed another mind might appear to be. It can never go out completely. That's the really good news. So the good news is how to get that spark to be reignited, so that spirit becomes an ongoing, active part of our every conscious moment. Bring this light fearlessly with you, and bravely hold it up to the foundation of the ego's thought system. Be willing to judge it with perfect honesty. Now that takes a lot. I mean, the perfect honesty, really look at how, among other things, dishonest we are. By dishonest, I mean how willing we are to fall into the ego's pull, whatever that pull is, whether it's the pull to anger, the pull to attack, the pull to the body. I mean, but to the body, I mean, there's one of my favorite lines in the Course is when you let your mind be drawn to bodily concerns, to things you buy, to eminences as valued by the world, you're asking for sorrow, not for happiness. So how often do we let the mind be drawn to bodily concerns? That's very often there, right? To things we buy, to eminences as valued by the world. We're asking for sorrow, not for happiness. But the reason we're asking for sorrow, not for happiness, is there's no contentment there. I mean, there's no satisfaction. There's no ultimate. That's a very important word, ultimate. You know, because we ultimately are talking about the ultimate. The ultimate is home. The ultimate's God. The ultimate's eternity. Again, which we never left. Right? Going a little bit further with this. Be willing to bring it with perfect honesty, open the dark corner of terror in which it rests, and bring it out into the light. There you will see that it rests on meaninglessness, and that everything of which you have been afraid was based on nothing. So what's the first characteristic of a teacher of God that's in the manual for teachers? It's trust, right? So this means that we're not trusting if we're falling into fear and into anxiety. It doesn't make any difference how big the problem is that appears to be in the world. The solution is always to trust. It's going to be okay. All I have to do is pay attention and do what God is asking me to do. The task is knowing what God's asking me to do. But again, that answer is always there as well. There's never a time the right answer is not. He says, in fact, as in the, I think it's principle number 5 of the 50 Miracles Principles, you will be told very specifically all you need to know. So it's just a matter of really, really listening. And we know, honestly, when we're being pulled off course. But we have to have integrity. That's the honesty part. The integrity to be willing to look at it and not to just simply keep going unconscious. Or another word that the Course uses is mindless. Uses the word mindless a lot. So when we go mindless, rather than being mindful. So when we're mindful, we're paying attention and we're doing what God is asking us to do. And there's no greater happiness. Again, that's why the book is called Perfect Happiness. There is only one will. I'll probably wind up saying this time and time and time again in so many different ways. There's only one will. And doing God's will is the thing that makes me really, really happy. In fact, if I'm doing God's will, there's a lot of things that I should notice. One is that things are seems to be happening naturally. That I just seem to be naturally happy. It's not a strain. It's not difficult, and I'm not running into problems. I mean, I'm not. Or if I run into problems, they're not problems. I mean, they're just events. Which the flat tire is a flat tire. You know, it's nothing that I have to go crazy about or get upset about. It's just these things happen to everybody, and so my responsibility here is to be responsible for what it is, and being responsible clears up the whole matter, right? So let's go a little bit further with this. I have this quote here from Jung, by the way, that I wanted to share with you as well, which goes with this. This is about getting closer into to looking at the dark shadows. I always thought this was going. It says, if you can imagine someone who's brave enough to withdraw all his projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. The Course is really asking us to look at, be willing, be courageous, be honest about looking at the shadow, right? Such a man can no longer say, they do this, or they must be fought against. There is no they in the Course. There's absolutely nobody, there's nobody out there. There's only what's in my mind. That's the only thing that's real. That's why the Course is again, and there's nothing outside of you. When we say there's nothing outside of you, we don't mean your body, we mean your mind. There's nothing outside of your mind. It's all in your mind. The question is, where does the mind go? Is the mind going to God? Is the mind listening? Is the mind hearing and then responding? Or am I being seduced by this insane world, right? Such a man knows that whatever is wrong in the world is in him. And if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he is doing something real for the world. He is successful in shouldering at least an infinitesimal part of the gigantic, unsolved social problem of our day. And all that you're doing in order to deal with the unsolved social problems of our day is just to look at where is it in me that I see the shadows, that I see somebody I don't like, that I see I think there's a reason to attack. I think that there's a reason to be upset. I come up with I project the problem. We see what we want to see is another way to say that. So the question is, what do you want to see? I don't know if I told you this story or not, but I'll tell it. Either I did or I didn't. You lose track when you travel around and talk to different groups. It's in here in this for writing for the day. there's a woman who's a guest in a hotel. And she calls the management and she says, there is a naked man walking around in the apartment directly across from my window. Something should be done about it. The manager goes up to investigate. He looks out the window and he says, well, you can't tell. I mean, it's only down to his waist. He could have his pants on for all you know. So you can't really tell. She says, no, he's completely naked. He says, well, how do you know that? She says, well, just you stand on the bed. Yes, exactly. We see what we want to see, right? And not only do we see what we want to see, but one of the problems with the ego is that it's always looking. That's the nature of the ego, is that it's looking for problems. It's looking for difficulties. It's on the watch for it. This is why the Course is so radical. That's why it's retraining the mind, completely retraining the mind. And this is why it's difficult. Because we have been trained for so long to think in a particular way that to engage in this process of the reversal and thinking of retraining the mind into a wholly another way, you spell holy however you want to spell holy, they both would work, in a wholly new way. It's an incredible shift. And this is again why the Course is so difficult, is because we don't even realize how indoctrinated we are by the ego, by the world, by news, by society, by the church, by our parents, by ourselves, indoctrinating ourselves. We do it to ourselves more than anything else. That's why the process is one of stopping this insanity, turning the whole process around, but it takes a lot of work. Because first of all, we don't see it. We don't see it because we're mindless of it. That's why I said before that what the Course is about, it's about raising the level of awareness. So that I'm consistently raising the level of awareness. So I do see, what I see first of all is that I'm insane. All right? You got an insane teacher. We're all insane. All right? But as I begin to see how insane I am, one of the things that you can look for is feeling attacked, for example. Okay, if you feel like you're being attacked from, let's say, a husband or a wife or a child, or just don't do anything. I mean, definitely don't attack back. Just see it. Just see it for what it is, and let it be what it is. There's actually there's this wonderful the phrase. There's a section in the Course called "I need do nothing," right? And very often all you got to do is just you do nothing, because if you're doing something, then to do something is to participate in the insanity. I mean, to do something is to further the insanity. There's a fellow who's written an article for a future issue of Miracles magazine. I don't know whether it's going to be the next issue or the next issue. One of the issues that's coming up. It's about his aunt who's now passed, so he can write this article. And the title of the article is "Ain't It Awful?" And he had an aunt, that was her favorite phrase. Right? Ain't it awful? Let me read you just a section about this. This need not be. This is from a chapter we've already done, 4, but I just want to read you one paragraph from it. Watch your mind. See, now, we've talked, I think, last time about the word look. The word look comes up a lot in the Course, and here's the word watch. Watch comes up a lot. And this is also true in the parables of Jesus. There's 3 parables of Jesus that are specifically about watching. Now, fundamentalist Christians interpret that to mean watch out for the devil. but Course in Miracles, we understand it's not about watching out for the devil. It's watching out for our own insanity, and it's watching out for the ego being actively engaged inside of us, right? Watch your mind for the temptations of the ego, and do not be deceived by it. It offers you nothing. So, for example, when we're tempted to be angry, right? That's definitely a temptation. We all know about that. We all know how simple and easy it is to fall into that temptation, to attack, or maybe just to say something, or to point out to somebody else what kind of an idiot they are, because it's clear to you. When you have given up this voluntary dispiriting, and that's interesting, when you've given up this voluntary dispiriting, so we voluntarily dispirit ourselves. Dispirit obviously means that the spirit's not there, but rather the ego's running the show. The thing about this is that we know when this has actually happened if we want to be honest and confess it. I mean, if we want to really, really recognize that this is not my higher mind that's in charge now, it's really this insane thing that's in charge, right? Watch your mind for the temptations of the ego, and do not be deceived by it. It offers you nothing. When you've given up this voluntary dispiriting, you will see how much your mind can be focused and raise above fatigue and heal. I mean, maybe one of the things that you remember my saying about Ken Wapnick was, and this is a really positive thing, that Ken had this remarkable ability to focus. This incredible ability to focus. Right, and I read once in an article that was done on happiness, that some sort of test the social psychologists had given to people to determine how happiness. There were a number of factors, but one of the factors that they said was that happy people have a good ability to focus. Isn't that interesting? They can focus, which means that they can concentrate, which means that they can, they get things done, among other things. In other words, there are not a lot of distractions. The ego is very easily distracted. In fact, not only is the ego very easily distracted, the ego looks for distractions. It's looking for things to pull it off course. It's looking for things to be worried about, and sometimes it's absolutely nothing, but just the tiniest little way somebody looks at you is a distraction, right? So finish this. When you give up this voluntary distraction, you will see how your mind can focus and rise above fatigue and heal. One of the things that you might find, not necessarily, I don't guarantee this, but that as you progress in the course, you may find that you're less fatigued, literally. I mean, that you literally are, there's a literal dimension to waking up, which becomes very practical. I mean, that you're literally waking up, and it feels good to wake up. It literally feels good to wake up. You might find yourself, well, this happens as we get older anyhow, I think, but waking up in the night and then thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to get enough sleep. The heck with it, get up and read the course for a while. There's a thing called second sleep. You know about second sleep? Yeah, some people are saying yes, they do. They say, second sleep, it used to be the natural rhythm is that we sleep about 4 hours and then we come back up again, and that's often the point at which you kind of wake up, at which point you could meditate or read or do something and then go back to sleep after that. All right. Yet you are not sufficiently vigilant against the demands of the ego to disengage yourself. This need not be. I'm going to read that last sentence again. Yet you are not sufficiently vigilant. So there's the word vigilant. Vigilant is like watch, it's like look, it's like be vigilant. In other words, as I've said here before, from Rumi, don't go back to sleep. Don't go back to sleep. We just to keep awake, stay awake, right? All right, let's go to page 3. Actually, the quote at the bottom of 3 I've already done. Actually, let me reread that. There's nothing outside of you That is what you must ultimately learn. For it's the realization the kingdom of heaven is restored to you. That is so important. So, for example, if you start to get angry, or you have an attack thought, or you want to project something on, that's a really good time to stop and to recognize, wait a minute, there's nothing outside of me. So if there's nothing outside of me, then whatever I am seeing has got to be inside me. And it doesn't make any difference what it is. Even if you think that there's plenty of justification that this person who is offering you advice on how you could improve yourself, I would really want to look at that. I really want to look at that. The ego's tendency is automatically get defensive. To automatically get defensive. Just stop the automatic defensive system. In defenselessness, my safety lies. That's true in every instant, even the smallest thing. There's no need for defenses. I told you, I just was in Copenhagen, actually. And one of the things that our host did was to take us out to see some castles. And I noticed one of the castles that he showed us was, boy, was that thing fortified. I mean, there was barrier after barrier after barrier after. You had to get across this moat, and then you had to get across this burden, and then you had to get across another moat, and then you had to get, just all of this protection, all of this, and can you be sort of a metaphor for the ego? That we are so well defended that we have actually layers of defenses. And so if the Course is saying if you're doing anything, just start letting go of some of those outer layers. But then as you move down, you may find out that there's deeper and darker layers. That's what this quote is about from Jung here. And when it says the closer you come to the foundation of the ego's thought system, the darker and more obscure. You may have to look at some really heavy stuff, like how really dishonest we are. I don't mean in some sort of overt way, but in some sort of subtle, covert way, right? Okay, let's go on to our next quote. On 4, I talk about how the ego sees the body as a weapon. That's one of the basic purposes of the body for the Course is it's a weapon. I can use it for attack. It's very easy to use it as a verbal attack mechanism, for one thing. Going down to the paragraph toward the bottom of 4. Remember, too, that their results are as different as their foundations. And their fundamental, irreconcilable nature, now we're talking about God and the ego here, right? And their fundamental, irreconcilable nature cannot be reconciled by vacillation between them. That's what we do. What we do is we vacillate. We go back and forth. God gets some of my attention some of the time. But it requires full time. The perfect happiness can only become about when we have the full time commitment. Nothing alive is fatherless, for life is creation. Therefore, your decision is always an answer to the question, who is my father? And you will be faithful to the father you choose. So what the Course is saying here is, what's Jesus' great revelation? Jesus' great revelation is, I and the Father are one. So there's literally no separation between the mind of God and Jesus' mind. That's the way he sees it, right? There's literally no difference. The way it is, we have the ego as the Father. We've made the ego into the Father, which is sort of incredible because we create our own Father in this process. So Dostoevsky said, God created man in his own image, and then man turned around and returned the favor. Right? So we turn it around and we go back, and we make God, the ego is now God. And we think we have to do whatever this Father says. And even though the Father asks some really terrible things of us, right? That we be unkind, that we hit someone, or that we be so. The main thing is that we recognize that. I think one of the things that Ken emphasized the most was the strong need we all have for individuality, and therefore for specialness. So we make ourselves special in some way. We see ourselves as a separated individual, which is what makes us special. And that also makes us unhappy. I read a really good book on the airplane going back and forth to Europe. It's by Robert Draper. Anybody know who Robert Draper is by any chance? Bob Draper was one of Ken's major supporters in many, many different ways. Actually, it's no secret that Bob provided Ken the money to buy Roscoe with back in a number of years ago. And the book is called I Am Not. Remember the talk I did here last time was called I'm Nobody, Who Are You? Right? Well, it's following this same theme. The theme is that if I think that I'm somebody, then that leads to a sense of isolation and division and separation and misery, because then I'm trapped inside that thought. I'm trapped inside that individuality. That's why the process, what God does, is God just gives. Give. That's why when we're involved in the process of just giving our love away, extension is a word that the Course in Miracles uses, then we're doing what God would have us to do. It's the very opposite of selfishness. Selfishness will always make us miserable, and we don't want to be miserable. So that's, Bob Draper is talking about that in his book, I Am Not. But that takes a lot to turn this around and go the other way with it. Okay, let's look at the quote on the top of 5. You want salvation, you want to be happy, you want peace, you do not have them now because your mind is totally undisciplined, and you cannot distinguish between joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, love and fear. So we're retraining the mind, we're getting to greater focus, we're watching out for our own insanity, and we're watching out for our own lack of discipline. That line there, by the way, your mind is totally undisciplined, was, believe it or not, directed very specifically at Helen. And if you think about it, Helen had a great ability to focus. I mean, she could hear the Course in Miracles, so she could write it down, right? But there was a more than one point at which Helen complained to Jesus, saying, this stuff isn't working. And, and Jesus' response was, well, why don't you do what I'm asking you to do? So you could hear my voice even better. That's the way this process works, right? So the authority problem. Let's look at the quote in the middle of 5. Yet what makes God's teachers is their recognition of the proper purpose of the body. So we've already said that the purpose of the body, the ego uses the body for attack. So when I think, how much time am I using a body for attack? Verbal, sometimes physical. If it gets down to physical, that's really pretty gross. I mean, that's really, you really are insane. If you're down to that level. Back to reading this quote. Yet what makes God's teachers is the recognition of the proper purpose of the body. As they advance in their profession, they become more and more certain that the body's function is but to let God's voice speak through it to human ears. To let God's voice speak through it to human ears. And these ears will carry to the mind of the hearer messages that are not of this world, and the mind will understand because of its source. I think one of the reasons that we all love A Course in Miracles so much is because we recognize that this is not of this world. that this message really comes from beyond this world. It has nothing to do with the ego. That's why there's no body, B-O-D-Y, in the Course. That's why the Course is only always talking about what's going on the level of the mind. We're just learning how insane we are, becoming more and more aware of that, demonstrating more and more willingness to look at that, and then to let it go. Often that's when I said I need do nothing, a lot of the time that's just be quiet. You know, and there's a sense in which Buddhism and the Course in Miracles have a good deal of similarity, because the goal of both is really coming to have a quiet mind or a peaceful mind. Right? That's the goal. Buddhism uses a different methodology. The primary methodology it uses is meditation. Now, there's certainly nothing wrong with meditation as a means to getting to have a quiet mind. The Course in Miracles is using a somewhat different methodology because what the Course is doing is asking us to heal our disturbed mind through the process of forgiveness, which then enables me to have a quiet mind because there's nothing in my mind to be upsetting my mind. So I get to have a quiet mind just because I've cleaned house. I've cleaned house. I've let go of all of the junk that was there. That's why in the beginning of the Manual for Teachers, principle number 7 is miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. First, we've got to clean house. As you begin to go through this, if you look at the 6 stages in the development of trust that's in the Manual for Teachers, the second and third stage are all cleaning house stages. They're all about sorting out and letting go of things that are unessential and things that we don't need. Right? So, the question repeatedly is, who is the author? And am I doing what God's asking me to do, or am I still doing what the ego is always asking me to do? I'm sure that I pointed out this before, but there's a paradox here, which is really, it makes it difficult to make this switch. The paradox is that we just can't believe that somehow or another our will and God's will is the same thing. How could it be that this greater mind's will and mine could be exactly the same? But the truth is that that's the only thing it can be. The only thing, that's why there is such a thing as perfect happiness. Because if the mind was completely realigned with the mind, then you'd be perfectly happy. Because there would be no distraction. There would be nothing to take away your peace of mind. This is why in terms of traditional Christianity, has really understood what happens with Jesus on the cross, is that Jesus is going to the cross to show us that this most outlandish thing that could possibly be done by one body to another body can happen, and he doesn't get upset about it. I mean, that he doesn't attack back, he doesn't say anything. As a matter of fact, when Jesus is standing in front of Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate says to him, "Don't you hear all these accusations that have been made against you? Don't you have anything to say for yourself?" And he doesn't. He has no defense, zero defense. So if he'd have come back with Pontius Pilate with, "Yes, I really am the Son of God, and you're making a big mistake here," we might have questioned whether or not he was the Son of God. Right? But you know that there's, so what we're being asked to do is to let go of much smaller things than that, where we don't stand up and get upset and attack back because of the kinds of things that seem to happen to us. I was talking to a fellow who's a Course in Miracles leader down in Virginia, in the Washington, D.C. area. We're actually going to be doing a workshop together a couple weeks from today. And I told him about this mistake that appears on the new book of calling me a master teacher. And I said, why did this happen? And he says, so you could learn how to have peace of mind even when something like this does happen. I thought that was a pretty good answer. You know, I mean, if there was a, even this mistake, this kind of thing can happen, and I haven't really succeeded in not getting a little upset about that, but shows you I'm not enlightened. Proof of the fact that they're wrong. Let's go let's read a little bit more on 6 and then we'll take a break. So, in whatever part of the mind the Son of God, in whatever part of the mind of the Son of God, you restore this reality, you restore it to yourself. You dwell in the mind of God with your brother, for God himself did not will you to be alone. It's impossible to get into the kingdom of heaven alone. The Course actually says that. You don't get in alone. It's impossible to get into the kingdom of heaven alone. This is really good news. I mean, because it's always a matter of sharing. One of the definitions of God that appears from the Course is, it says, divine abstraction, that's God, takes joy in sharing. And it's really a wonderful, the greatest joys that we have in life is whenever we're sharing. It's the total opposite of loneliness and isolation and brokenness, right? I mean, that's the highest of highs. Actually, the highest of highs that we think of in this world is falling in love, right? And the reason why we think it's the highest of highs is because the joining of the minds, the two of you are coming together in agreement that what you have is love for each other. That's and all you want to do is give to the beloved. You just want to give to the beloved, which is God's relationship with us all the time. Because all God wants to do is give to all of us all the time. And the only question is, are we willing to receive? Are we willing to receive this kind of blessed abundance which is available to us? But that's nothing to do with anything physical. It may be something physical too, but it's not that. It's really just a matter of awareness. This awareness. If you really knew, the Course says at one point, if you really knew how much waits for you inside the doorway of heaven, it's a fact. We're so protective of this life, and one of the worst things that can happen what's the worst thing that can happen? We think the worst thing that can happen, we die, right? That's not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen is the opposite of that, is to be feeling of being isolated and trapped inside this limited framework. That's why it's all about the mind. It's all about expanding the mind to the point where the mind knows God. We talked about that in the past. And then one more quote here, and then we'll take our break. If you made the ego, how can the ego have made you? Now that's a very important question. See, the Course is trying to get it back to, it looks like the ego made us, but that's not possible. You made the ego. The party problem is still the only source of conflict, because the ego was made out of the wish of God's Son to father him. The ego then is nothing more than a delusional system in which you made your own father. It's a good definition for the ego, right? First of all, it's a delusional system, so it's not a true system. It's something we made up with. This is what happens to Adam on the morning of the first morning, when he sees himself as being separate. This is the biting into the fruit of the knowledge. What's it knowledge of? Good and evil. So once we have good and evil, now we have a split mind. And once we got a split mind, we have a disturbed mind. And that disturbed mind, historically speaking, has been looking, trying to figure out how the heck to get back home ever since. But seeing how we gave birth to this ego thing and it looks so very, 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 very real, it's really hard to get out of it. It's really hard to break free of it. As you all know, I have the theory that that's one of the reasons Ken went home. That he succeeded in breaking out of it, and having broken out of it, couldn't hold on to the body anymore. I mean, couldn't hold on to the physical frame of the thing. The Course says itself that would be very difficult to do that if you were to completely succeed at this work. But that's what we want to do. We all want to go home. That phraseology is used a great deal. There's no place that you feel more comfortable, or the Course says, are more welcomed. You know, it says it is the place where you are truly welcome. Yeah, what more could you want to be than be truly, truly welcome? And so many of the near-death experience people will talk about that, being so truly welcome. Okay, we're at almost the time. Is there any final questions before we break? Then let's take a break.